It's been a while because I've been busy, but today we are going to be going into what Newspeak is, like I said in the last part. Because there's a couple words in this book that I wasn't exactly sure what they meant, but I wanted to know. It will help me my understanding of the novel going forward. So they have the appendix at the end of the book called The Principles of Newspeak. Newspeak being the language that is spoken in Oceania, the setting of this story. And I read it like a couple days ago, but I took some notes. So let's just hope I remember, like, not only what the notes said, but more than that, so I can really like explain well and discuss what Newspeak actually is. So one of the so to start off, I want to say the name of the party is a Newspeak word, right? Then I'm not sure how to pronounce it. If it's Ingsoc, but it's supposed to stand for. It means English socialism. So Ing being English part, and then socialism being soc or sos. Is it Ing sos? I don't know. So, but that's the name of the party, and the one party of the country of the whole nation of Oceania is called Ingsoc. And apparently, like later on, we'll get into how it's supposed to be a language developed for the ease of pronunciation, but that's a pretty hard word to pronounce. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to say that. Ingsoc, Ingsos. I don't know, but essentially, it was developed to meet the ideological needs of the society that is Oceania in 1984. So they basically took out a bunch of useless words, and there's a lot of notes I took, so we're going to be talking about this for a while. And basically their goal was to eliminate old speak, which is regular English, by the year 2050, and it's going to be like a slow gradual process. And as the older people die out and they age, there's going to be less people that know of old speak, or less people that consider it, even like thinking of it as being not taboo, right? So they want to essentially eliminate anything that can be related to regular English, which is old speak. And the purpose of new speak, because why would they be replacing old speak unless there's a good reason for it? Normally languages are supposed to evolve over time, like in a natural way, but they're forcing it onto the people, right? And why? So they say the purpose of new speak is to make thought outside of the realm of ingsoc or ingsos English socialism impossible. So they only want people to be able to think within those parameters. So anything, I guess, I guess the opposite of like socialists would be like, I guess, semi-conservatives or something like that. So that's impossible to think about, as it should be within 1984, because the conservatives of this setting would be the people trying to keep old speak, which is being like abolished. And if this happens, then it's going to be impossible to rebel against the government. I'm just going to say the government because it's hard to say ingsoc, or I don't know how I'm supposed to pronounce it, or I'll just say English socialism. What one or the other, one of them. So it's going to be impossible to rebel against um, what the government teaches, and even more so for the kids who are born into this English socialism environment, because they're not going to know of old speak. They're not going to know of the way old speak was spoken, even though a lot of the words are similar. All of them actually coming from old speak, but the usages are, as we're going to get into, they're pretty different, the way each word is being used. And younger people aren't going to know about the old ways of using words, so they're only going to know the new ways of using words, which is more restricted, which means that the way they think is also going to be more restricted. Like I was when I was like looking into like different languages of different areas in the world, apparently there's like this one tribe in Australia, and they don't have words for like left or right. they only have north, south, east, and west, right? So for them, it's like that's the way they think. Whereas for people who don't grow up with that, it's gonna be harder for them to tell. Oh yeah, just go walk north this way, walk south that way, for that many steps. To like if you're asking for directions, when for them it's gonna be the natural way that they do it. So in the same way, the way they think, like the new kids born into the old speak or born into the Newspeak regime, the Newspeak era, they're not gonna know. It's gonna be like foreign ideas to them. Like if basically if they've never heard of a color, how are they gonna describe it? How are they gonna even think of a color? You can't think of a color like just a new color out of nowhere. Like you only know what you know, and that's how what is gonna be like for the kids born in using Newspeak. And I think it's kind of similar to how, from what I know of North Korea, how it works over there. Because if you have limited access to other ways of thought or other like knowledge outside of what the government tells you, then to a certain extent ignorance is bliss. But then like you don't know what you're missing out on, and it's impossible to like think about it because the language is structured in a way that it's essentially impossible for you to think in a way that goes against ingsoc, right? So yeah, I made some notes. They want to do this by removing words that could make it possible to think contrary to what is accepted. um but it made me think, is does that mean like languages other than Newspeak are illegal? Like how do they communicate with other countries? Like because there's three main nations. There's East Asia. um yeah, there's East Asia. The I forgot the other one that's like controlled by like I can't remember, but there's three of them: Oceania, East Asia, and one other, right? I just had to go plug in my computer, but yeah. Does this mean that words other languages are illegal? That's what I think I was talking about that, and that kind of not to the same extent at all, but like in Quebec, I know that they have certain laws to keep the French language in place. And I know it's not really comparable because that's more like a language protection act rather than other language suppression act. Is more like make sure everyone knows French rather than make sure no one knows any other language, right? But it kind of not really. It's not really comparable. But if it was like the same concept but taken to the extreme in Quebec, that's how I think they would get to the whole concept of Newspeak. Or yeah, Newspeak. And in this Newspeak language, words are stripped of any other meaning. So any one word can only have one usage. And it would essentially make it impossible to say things that have ambiguous meaning. But at the same time, um, expression can become much more difficult with that because words are so limited. So, and they're also removing words from the language of Old Speak to create New Speak. So there's less words, and they continuously remove words until it can be as small as possible, and each word only has one meaning. So, I think the example they gave is like if you have the word free, and how would you use the word free? Would you say, "Oh, this thing is free, like this item in the store is free," or would you say, "These fries are free of salt," or would you say, "I am free," like as in freedom, right? So only one meaning, which is the meaning that they use, like free of salt, like free of something, like lacking something. That's the only sense of free that they use. So the concept of like intellectually or politically free does not exist, and free can only be used in the sense of like lacking something rather than being unbound. You can't be unbound, and you can't like think for yourself. You have to think according to ingsoc, right? So that it makes that's like a scary thought if that were ever to happen. I can't see that happening in the real world. At least not right now, though. That'd be crazy. And you'd have to have a unified language for the whole world, or at least where you're trying to impose a language over, which is, I don't see that happening, especially not in North America, which is probably the most likely place for that to happen, I'd say. But there's too much diversity for that even to occur because all the different groups speak different languages, right? So that's that's unlikely. So yeah, essentially, in the same way that freedom is restricted in the society, your expression, the way you can express yourself, is also restricted. And yeah, it's like your language is as free as your person, which is not that free in Oceania. So Newspeak is comprised of three different categories of vocabulary. They have A, B, and C vocabulary. The ones being used the most is A, and then B for like more of like the intellectual people, like intellectual, or I don't know why I'm using air quotes, but B is for more like political reasons, so propaganda and things like that. Like I don't know if they would really have debates, but any like probably news is gonna be using more B vocabulary, and then C is like for well, I'll get into what C is later on. Anyway, just to start with A vocab, right? So A vocab is the basics. It's small basic words like hit, drink, eat, walk, etc., etc., anything like that, right? It's the things that you expect to learn when you're first picking up a new language. The things that will help you like communicate like everyday actions to someone else, like, "Hey, how are you doing?" or "I did buy bread," something like that, right? So all these A vocab words were words that were taken from Old Speak, but then the way that they're defined now is very rigid and very restricted, right? These are the words that have been stripped of most of their meaning. And it kind of goes like in a like A has the least meaning in the words definitions, B has slightly more meaning, but it's also really restricted for because of the way that they have to be used, and then C has probably the most meaning, but there's a very technical reason for that, which we'll get into later. But yeah, it's very hard to use a vocab in intellectual conversation because they're all like so basic and they're all like essentially not meaningless words, but there's no nuance in the definition, so you have to just like use it for what it is. And there's no like you can't like let me think of an idiom. If I you're like, well, there's not going to be any idioms and there's not going to be any metaphors because each word will only be used in its specific meaning. Anyone would not, no one would be able to understand you if you use like a figure of speech, basically. So that's essentially what a vocab does. And there's gonna be there's grammar changes, and there's no homonyms in a vocab. So um, it's there. They gave the example of the word cut. It's no longer existing in Newspeak. Instead of saying cut, they just say knife, and then the word knife carries the meaning for cutting, and it carries the meaning for like the object, the knife, but it's understandable, right? So if you say I knife wall or I knife the wall, right? They know you mean I cut the wall, and they probably will know also that you're using a knife to knife the wall, right? So no homonyms, and each word like that can be used as a noun or a verb. So knife being the noun, like the object, the knife that you're gonna go, and then knife being the verb, like when you what you use the for, right? So it's the noun verb. They're all noun verbs basically, and you can change it into an adjective by putting full at the end, like as a suffix. So I can't remember any examples that they gave. I think like speedful means quickly, right? And then you can turn it into a adverb by adding y's at the end, like wise at the end of any word. So speed wise would be. Wait, I forgot how to use adverbs. Not gonna lie, I'll remember throughout this explanation maybe. What is an adverb? I think it describes now. I forgot that. I feel stupid, but yeah. So words can be used both as verbs and nouns, and like the word thought is gone, like to think, and they just use the word think instead, and think can be used as a noun and a verb. So that's where you get, like, in the first chapter there's talking about crime think, and that's a B vocab though, but it uses the root of the A vocab word think, which so think, so I think, but then your think means like your thoughts, and then if you have bad think, that means you have unorthodox thinking, and if you have good think, it means it's orthodox think, right? Or orthodox thinking. They're getting me to use this Newspeak already. um yeah, so it's those are like some of the more basic rules. Then this is another basic rule: negatives are conveyed by using the prefix un, like un. So unthink means did not think, basically, or do not think. Wait, I'm not sure if it can be used like that, or like to undo your thinking, but we know how un is used, like unintelligent versus intelligent, right? But that can be used on any of the noun verbs in this language. And vary is not a word, so Very, that's not a word. Instead, to strengthen the meaning, you use the prefix plus, and then you use, if you want to say something really strong, you say double plus. And I'm not gonna lie, this is one of the things that I like this part of Newspeak, like just saying double plus. Like if you say like double plus speed, like imagine that. That feels like some like an anime command where someone's like, do this with double plus speed or something like that. I don't know, but I like that. I might start using that. Not gonna like not ironically use it, like just seriously, and until it catches on. And something that English can adopt, I'd say, is this next rule. Instead of having so many irregular verbs, all their noun verbs can be conjugated to the past participle by adding ed at the end. So there's no more, like, there's no thought, it's thinked. There's no brang or brought, is bringed, right? So much more simple, so much more simple than what we have to do and like memorize every single one in English. And even though I was like young when I learned English, well, it's my first language, so it didn't really feel like I was learning it. It's kind of natural to me. But for people trying to learn English, that's probably one of the hardest parts, to memorize all the past conjugations of every verb, because they do not they are not coinciding with each other. Like it's just random for some of them. Like if we say bring and brought, why don't we say ping and pot? Like P OUGHT. Why don't we spell it like that? It's pinged. I don't get that. I'll never get that. So I think English can really adopt that. Same with like read and read. It's just readed. And some people even say that, like young kids. And they're onto something. And all plurals are either s or es depending on like the ending of the previous word of the word. So there's not going to be any more words like life and lives. It's going to be life and lifes. And there's no man and men. It's mans, like mans. I pronounce that weird. Mans, and then no men. Then instead of oxen for ox, it's going to be oxes, right? That's probably also so much more simple. I know there's like some like Greek root or Latin root as a reason why we have different pluralizations, but if that were done away with, I wouldn't mind. And then instead of saying like good, better, and best, we would only say good, gooder, and goodest, right? And all of them are like that. To I don't know what this is called, but like just like the steps of like just saying how good something is, I guess, or like bad, worse, or and then worst is bad, badder, and baddest. Which people already do say like bad and bad or baddest, but no one says badder. But that sounds like cake. Anyways, yeah. So that's basically all the like the basic grammatical rules and how um the A vocab works, right? Okay. Now, for B vocabulary, right? B vocabulary was made specifically for political ideas. And the book says in the appendix that it's hard to comprehend without a good understanding of ingsoc, right? So, without understanding the party and without having a good understanding of Newspeak basic words, you're like lost for hope having you're lost for having any hope in understanding any of the B vocabularies. And like basically upper class speech, right? Kind of like that. And they like combine words such as ingsoc, right? And they have another one called well, I'll get to that soon. So they say that the priority is in ease of pronunciation, which I don't know how that works with ingsoc because that is hard to. I don't even know how I'm supposed to be pronouncing that. And all compound words are in noun verb structure, right? So they'll have the noun as the root, well, the first root, and then the verb as the second root, right? So for example, they have the word good think, right? Good being a noun, like something that is good, not in the adjective way, because that'd be goodful in Newspeak. But we have good as a noun, then think as what's it called? The verb. My mind's farting, brain fart. Um, yeah, so good think. Thoughts that are considered orthodox by ingsoc, right? And you wouldn't know that unless you understood the party already. So you have to have a good understanding of the party to then understand what they mean by all their terms. And they have another word, think pole, and it's like a shortened version of police because ease of pronunciation and think pole. So think in this case, instead of like in the previous example, think was the verb, but now we're using think as a noun. So basically your thoughts, right? So the thought police, and they're policing your thoughts. Because I know police could. I got confused by this at first. I thought police was going to be the noun, but I forgot that policing is a verb. So police is in the verb form. So they police thoughts. And all B words could be transformed into an adverbial, verbal, adjectival manner, as well as being used as both nouns and verbs, just like a vocab. And all the same suffixes and prefixes apply as well. So the same grammar structure. It's just that these are all like compound words that have like political meanings behind them. And yeah, B vocabulary is incomprehensible without mastery of Newspeak and all like specific meanings of its new words. So you'd have to know which words were stripped down. If you're like from the old generation, if you're a new generation, you'll already understand which. Well, you wouldn't even know of the words being stripped down of their definition. You just think, oh yeah, that's what it means, right? So without having a mastery and a good understanding of the political party, then you would not have any like chance of understanding what people are talking about when they're using B vocab. And an example of this is they gave a sentence, and the sentence is old thinkers unbelly feel ingsoc, right? So old think is like if you understand Newspeak, you'll know that old speak has a bad connotation to it, right? So old think so old thinkers are people that think old or old think, right? This is going to be a little confusing to explain, but so old thinkers, people that keep the ways of old think or old speak. Um, like they're already considered evil by all the people that grew up in Newspeak, and Bellyfeel is described as in the book an undying and blind love and support of something, which would probably tend to be Ingsoc, right? So if you belly feel and that's a good thing, like basically blind submission, then unbelly feel means you basically hate, right? So that's basically a propaganda line. Um, that old thinkers unbelly feel Ingsoc, right? So it's a given considering the context of the book and considering how people would think growing up. And yeah, that would just be something normal, and that'd be a sentence that would be like as like smooth and like it would be very understandable according to like the political party and all the people that grew up supporting it their whole life, right? That'll just be a given, like the fact that bread goes with butter or something like that. And this is like a little bit of a separate point, but honor, justice, morality, internationalism, democracy, religion, science are not words. Like all those things are not words anymore. And they're like they are considered all under the definition of one word, which would be unsurprisingly crime think, right? So any of those concepts, right? They don't people of the Oceania who grow up in learning Newspeak would not even need to know the definition of all those things, right? Because they're all just under the umbrella of crime think. So yeah, that's like a good example of how like words are stripped away of meaning and then new words are created, but only to serve political ideas. Because like this is basically like anti-enlightenment thinking by Ingsoc, right? To consider all those terms just to be crime things, so you can't even like think about it, right? Like it's bad to think about things like that. And it's like things that would like all those are all concepts that could like usurp power from Ingsoc, right? And on page 311 they made a comparison to Hebrew people of the Old Testament, saying it's like how Abraham and the Israelites would not need to, well, not Abraham, but the Israelites would not need to know exactly who, like what other gods the other like nations around them were worshiping, because they all just knew that it was false gods, right? So they didn't need to know the specific names, but it was all under the umbrella term of false, right? And in the same way, they they just consider all the sep they just consider those ideas as crime think, right? So it's all under one term. They don't really need to have an understanding of what it is, especially according to Ingsoc, because they're like a totalitarian thing, right? But yeah, and all B words are purposely made to not be ideologically neutral, so they're all supposed to be pushing you towards Ingsoc, right? Just like the whole sentence old thinkers unbelly feel Ingsoc, right? It's pushing you towards Ingsoc even more, because people are aware of the given fact that old think is a bad thing. That's like what they grew up knowing. Basically, as it's like as given as lions would are dangerous, right? So for them, old think, oh no, it's a bad thing. So of course they unbelly feel Ingsoc, right? And all the words are constructed in a way to convey some political idea that is against no, that is for Ingsoc and the English socialism. I'll just say that for now. I don't know. I'm going back to Ingsoc. Um, and words are like flipped of their meaning as well, right? So when they say a joy camp, it is really a labor camp, right? And that made me think the political parties. I was like, why are these the names of the, not political parties, the ministries in the government, right? I was like, why are these the names of it? And for example, Minipax or Ministry of Peace means war, right? But and I in the previous video I said that peace is war for them, but I guess I was a little off. But they're just like trying to like flip the meaning to like make it sound like a good thing for the party, right? And it's done so on purpose, right? So ministry names and other words are also shortened on purpose. This is not only to show like comparison to totalitarian regimes in the real world, like like when they abbreviate like the Socialist Party of Germany, right? The Workers' Part, what was it called? You know the whole thing, right? They shortened it to 4 letters, you know the 4 letters, right? And then, so in the same way, I guess the author was trying to, George Orwell was trying to make a comparison between those totalitarian regimes and the different ministries in this world, in this story. And it also is for the sake of removing any negative connotations that are associated with like the full words, and this is done by like in the example of Comintern, right? It's actually like the full name is Communist International, but they shorten it to Comintern, so you don't think of like people like Karl Marx and red flags and barricades, but instead you think of like a closely knit group. That's the whole idea behind shortening the words. And essentially, right, the goal was for citizens to achieve something called duck speak, and that is quacking like a duck. Like, this is the whole idea behind shortening the words, making them easy to say. That they're not that easy to say. Maybe it's just awkward for me because I'm used to regular English, not Newspeak. I'm used to old speak. But so long as the vocabulary becomes smaller and smaller each year, the possibilities for unorthodox thinking is diminished as well, like to the extent that the language is like restricted and shrunk. I'm thinking wrong now. Wow, that's a bad thing. But as much as it's shrunk, so does your possibility of expressing anything anti-ingsoc, right? You just can't unbelly feel them anymore, right? And for them to achieve duck speak, it's going to be like quacking like a duck, just like wah, 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 like a machine gun in speed, in accordance with ingsoc philosophies and ingsoc principles and ingsoc whatever, right? As long as it's like pro ingsoc, then it's going to be duck speak. That's essentially what they call it, quacking the rhetoric like a duck quacks, like. And this would be involuntary, like how in the first chapter of the book they're all saying B B B B B B Big Brother, chanting for Big Brother, right, against Goldstein. And yeah, finally we get to C vocabulary. And C vocabulary, it's really technical. It literally is technical terms, right? Scientific and technical terms, even though they don't even know what science is because it's not even a word anymore. But these are words that are rarely used, and its only use is really in particular fields where it's important, and it's going to be like hard to understand otherwise since the language is so restricted. Most of the words in this category also come from English or Old Speak, and even though it's surprising that there's no word for science, what did my notes say? It says this is because it was not thought as it was not thought of as a method of thought or a habit of mind, and the meaning of science was integrated by the term ingsoc. So just as in the same way that like the actual meaning of science and like democracy and religion was all turned into crime think, now the meaning of like well the sciences that they do use, probably like mechanical stuff, is just ingsoc, right? So they associate things that are, I guess, considered good in nowadays to their political party, right? So all the good associations are with the political party, and everything bad is what crime think, even though the bad things are actually good things. And some of the good things in Inksock are good things, but is like vastly overshadowed by all the bad stuff, or not bad, but like restrictions and not freedom. That is like, um, I don't know the word, but that's like pushed by Inksock. And then yeah, so that's basically it for C vocab. It's really niche and very like particular usage. But just as like a summary of like what Newspeak is, basically like general rules, right? General rules of Newspeak are that like being unorthodox is essentially impossible anymore. Like unless you were growing up when Old Speak was still being used, being unorthodox is impossible because either the words would need to be said using Old Speak definitions, because remember the definitions are really stripped away of like any nuance, and it's like only one strict rigid definition now, right? Or the sentence would appear to be like a paradox to Oceanians. Like if you were to say the phrase Ingsoc is ungood, they would be like, huh? That's like saying up is down to them, right? Because the brainwashing that they've gone through basically makes it impossible to think anything otherwise, right? And people who grew up in Newspeak era are not able to double think because of their lack of awareness and understanding of Old Speak, right? Old Speak definitions like of words like equal or free, like because there's no more politically equal or intellectually free. The only equal would be like in math, like this equals that. I don't even know because I heard something about in this book 2 + 2 = 5, but that's, we'll see if that is actually in this book. And since Newspeak's always becoming smaller and word usage more rigid, politically the potential for political dissent also diminishes, right? Like I said before, like if you don't know of a concept, you can't, it's like I can't argue against the existence of a color that I don't know about, right? It's just impossible because I don't know about the color that they're arguing, right? Someone tries telling me about this color that I've never heard of before after 18 years of life, right? And then I'm supposed to like just take them seriously? No, I'm not. And that's the same way that they're thinking. Like anyone who grew up using Newspeak, they're like, "What are you talking about? That's not a real thing." They can't even like fathom its existence, right? Because it's just unknown to them. They're unaware. In this case, ignorance is not bliss. Maybe it is for them, but like from an outside perspective, reading into this book, it's really not bliss. And over time, it becomes even less possible to translate Old Speak into New Speak because all the definitions and words in Old Speak, it's like there's like a quarter of the words, so it's basically impossible. And that means no ideas. This is the scariest part. No ideas from the past can make its way into the future because all those words are just gone. The words that would carry the ideas' meanings are gone, and it's just impossible to like. So with Winston's dilemma from before about speaking to the future, how would the future even understand? Like assuming it is the same, how would they even understand? Because it's going to be like a foreign alien language to them. That's the scariest part. You can't have any ideas from the past. It's going to be all foreign. Either it's going to be like a huge epiphany for the people that read it, if they ever do read it, or it's hopeless. It's going to be like the codex that they're trying to like unscrabble or something like that. It's just going to be like completely impossible. But yeah, that's Newspeak. It's got some good parts. It got more bad parts, mostly bad stuff. I would never want this to be imposed on anyone. That's terrible. Like, except for the conjugation stuff. The conjugation stuff's pretty cool, but the whole everything else about this is it's not kind of terrible. Yeah. Now that I have a good understanding of Newspeak, I just hope I understand like a lot of the B vocab that's going to be used in the book. So I'm going to be able to like understand the meaning, like unbelly feel and other words like that. And I'll try to get chapter 2 out as soon as possible. If you like this continue watching, keep waiting. I'll try to get it out sooner. I won't wait a week again. But yeah, that's about it.